They lied. They cheated. They laughed in people's faces. And then every single one of them got what they deserved. Today on Storytime with Sean S., we're counting down some of the most satisfying workplace karma stories I've ever come across. Bosses fired, companies fined, careers ended, all by the very people they thought they could push around. Let's get into it. Every single one of these stories is from Quora. Story 1 is titled, The Newspaper Editor Who Kept Secret Records. I was the editor for a small daily newspaper in Texas. I had 4 reporters and a photographer on my team. Newspapers are notorious for not paying overtime, even though it is the law in most cases. They force the employees to work 50 to 60 hours a week and to turn in a 40-hour time card. They paid no overtime. The bad thing was, I was the one who had to tell them to do it. The only option was to work without pay or get fired, and people needed a job, so they stayed. I secretly kept meticulous records. I had each employee fill out their real hours on a time card and give it to me. I took notes of every conversation. Eventually, I got fired because a story that I didn't know about made it into the paper. Shouldn't have been that big of a deal, but I was relieved. My first order of business was to contact the labor board in the state. I gave them the actual hours and the copies of the time cards the employees were forced to sign, along with notes about conversations I'd had. A few weeks later, the paper was fined several $1,000s and had to pay every employee, including me, back pay with overtime, and fired my boss. That was a good piece of revenge.
Very expensive.
That one was all about patience paying off in a big way. But this next guy, he didn't even plan it until the moment they handed him a reason, titled, The Software License Report. Only once, and I'm still conflicted about it. 15 years later, I was fired from a small company that used a lot of pirated software. Microsoft products everywhere. The firing wasn't because of my performance. The owner wanted to make room for his stepson to take my job. It was during the holidays, and he wouldn't even let me stay until Christmas, which was 2 weeks away. I was called into the office, told I was being let go, and told to get my things and leave by the end of the day. I went back to my office. From there, I filed a report with the Business Software Alliance to report all of the pirated software they used. Then I packed my stuff and said goodbye to my friends and walked out. Later, I heard the BSA came in and hit them hard. They had over $350,000 worth of unlicensed software for which they had to pay. I believe they were hit with a fine on top of that. Since this was a very small company, 12 employees, it hurt them badly, and they had to lay off 2 people. Now, at the beginning of this, I said I feel conflicted. Here's why. I worked for the company for over 2 years and knew they used pirated software the entire time. I even used the pirated software to do my own job, with the full understanding that it wasn't licensed. It never bothered me enough to report it until I was fired. I have to accept that. While I told myself it was about ethics at the time, it was purely revenge. I'm a little ashamed of that. Only a little.
Ha-ha! Take that!
Okay, he admitted it really wasn't about the ethics. You gotta respect the honesty. Now this next guy, no guilt whatsoever. Just clean, cold, beautiful logic. Titled, The Consultant Who Kept His 4 Copies. I was a contractor for a large IT company. After we wrapped up our 18-month project, the original manager moved to a different role. And that was a smart move on his part. His replacement was a real piece of work. He was dismissive of the progress we had made before he took over. He constantly pushed back on meetings, and then he canceled them. And without ever actually meeting with anyone, he declined to hire us back for the next phase of the project. Instead, he wanted us to fill him in verbally. So I wrote up all the math and statistical analysis I had done. 25 pages. He never even read it. He had me stop to explain it in person. 10 minutes into a 1-hour meeting. Then he said he didn't like my approach and dismissed me. That's when I found a new job and left ahead of schedule. 1 month later, his managers were asking him to explain the math and statistics from phase 1, which he had already received by email and hard copy from me, twice each. For whatever reason, he lost all his copies and needed my help. I declined. He'd already gotten 4 copies from me, and he told me he didn't like my approach anyway. Apparently, his managers weren't impressed with that answer either.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Dude had 4 copies and couldn't keep 1. Next up, someone who turned post-employment phone calls into a very profitable side hustle. Titled, "My consulting rate is $150 an hour, minimum 4 hours." Actually, I wasn't fired, but my direct supervisor made working there impossible unless you were in her circle of friends. The day after I left, I started getting calls from that office, asking about various things. I told them I'd get back to them. Then I sent an email to corporate and to management in our area, letting them know that from that point forward I would be happy to help, but my fee was $150 an hour with a minimum 4-hour charge. The clock started ticking the moment I answered a call or opened an email. The next day, I got a call. I helped the caller with the issue. Then I sent an electronic invoice to corporate. They called back, said it was only a 10-minute call, and said they were willing to pay me $20. I reminded them of the email. I told them if I didn't receive payment in full, $600 within 30 days, I would notify the credit reporting agencies and start legal proceedings. 3 days later, a check arrived. FedEx, next day delivery, signature required. Strangely enough, I have yet to receive another call or email from any of their employees. I can't imagine why.
Thank you.
Bet that company will think twice about who they fire next time. Now, what happens if the wrong person gets promoted and has to give a speech to 500 people? Let's find out. The absolute funniest revenge story I personally witnessed happened back in the early 1980s when I was working for the headquarters of a major drugstore chain in Southern California. We were a great company to work for, and the president was an amazing leader. Unfortunately, after a sale, a new board of directors cleaned out quality leadership and installed an uneducated sycophant as the new president. At our annual meeting, this man had to give a state of the company address to 500 people. He was absolutely terrified of public speaking. He wrote his speech on 3x5 note cards and handed them to someone who shall remain nameless for safekeeping. Then he went to have a few drinks to steel his courage. The unnamed person accidentally shuffled the index cards. Not once, not twice, 3 times, ensuring they were now completely in random order. The new president was not smart enough to have numbered the cards. He took the podium slightly inebriated and proceeded to read his entire speech off the cards, even though the order made absolutely no sense now. As he went on, card by card, all 500 people watching for the full address. He was mercifully terminated not long after. All I can say is it couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. Well, I guess the liquid courage thing kinda worked because he went ahead and did his speech completely out of order. I guess the drinks were making him kind of think YOLO. The next story is quieter, but the results speak for themselves. Titled, "They Needed 3 People to Replace Me." This happened to my husband when we were first married. He was working salary, 60 to 70 hours a week for a company that was a family business. Everyone in the office was family except my husband and the skilled field employees. The family office staff didn't do nearly as much as he did, so he asked for a raise since he was doing work at a significantly higher level than his job title. He also asked for an assistant because the workload genuinely required one. My husband already knew they'd probably say no, so he was prepared. He had gotten a license to form his own company and walked in with a resignation letter in his pocket. When he asked for the raise and the assistant, his boss literally laughed in his face. So my husband handed in the resignation letter and walked out. He had a couple of jobs already lined up from connections he had built from outside the company, so he didn't miss a single beat. A week later, his boss called begging him to come back. My husband declined. They had to hire 3 people to fill his position. Within 2 years, they were out of business. I'm proud that my husband did all of this with class, dignity, and integrity. He never needed to say a word. The results did all the talking.
Who's laughing now?
Now it's not so funny, is it?
They do say he who laughs last, laughs best. That boss didn't realize the joke was on him. Next up, a supervisor thought taking a fake medical leave was a brilliant plan. She didn't account for the break room. She was the type who enjoyed micromanaging and exercising her power over those beneath her. Life happened and word came through the grapevine that she was taking mental health leave. Fair enough. Less than a week later, I was looking through a paper someone had left in the break room and saw an advertisement. She was working at a nail salon and offering discounts for new customers, while on paid leave by the Commonwealth of Virginia. Oh, hell no. I made copies of that ad and slid them under the doors of every member of management in my building. She made the decision to resign within a week.
What had happened was...
Bet she really needed mental health services then. Mental health is not a joke. For our next story, one sentence on an exit interview changed an entire company. Titled, The Exit Interview That Launched a Career. I worked for Sherwin-Williams years back. Our district manager was the best. He inspired us. He was tough when needed, but he was fair, and he truly understood the business. The regional manager position opened up. It came down to our district manager, Louis, and a yes man from the home office. They chose the yes man, and we all hated the choice. The guy was awful to work for. Eventually, I decided to leave the company. On my exit interview, my final comment was, whoever hired this guy over Louis has their head up their rear end. A few months later, I happened to go to a Sherwin-Williams store and ran into someone who had been a store manager in our district. He was now the new district manager. He greeted me like a long-lost hero. He insisted we go to lunch and asked if I said something in my exit interview. I told him what I'd written and he nearly fell out of his chair laughing. He told me the regional manager had been called into the CEO's office. The CEO handed him my exit interview and asked for his comments. Not long after, he was fired. Louis became regional manager. Louis eventually became CEO. One sentence on an exit interview. That's all it took. I think I might want the writer of that story to give me a reference. Next up, 2 mechanics got illegally suspended, so they made 2 phone calls and they brought down an entire chain, titled the OSHA Call. I was in automotive tech for a few years. My last position was at a small, locally owned oil and lube shop. The owner was not a good man. He took big game hunting trips to Africa, only donated to charity for tax breaks, and had zero empathy for people. His holiday bonuses were $25 gift cards to his store. His nephew was the manager and had a favorite saying, "If you don't do it, you can take it to the house." One day, all us employees got pulled in for morale talks. Really, it was the owner trying to find out whether 2 of us mechanics were planning to open our own shop, which we were. The next day, both of us were suspended for 2 weeks for allegedly smelling like whiskey. We didn't. This was their way of avoiding paying unemployment. So I called OSHA and the EPA to report all the illegal waste disposal and unsafe work conditions I witnessed during my time there. Within weeks, OSHA forced them to completely clean up the entire garage. The EPA hit them with a massive fine. 2 months later, all their locations were sold off. Sometimes the best revenge doesn't require you to do anything dramatic. It just requires a phone call. My Uncle Reggie used to say, let your fingers do the walking. Sounds like that business got to walk straight into bankruptcy court. We've got one more story. A bounced severance check, missing laptops, and an exchange that genuinely sounds like a movie scene. Titled, I Was Fired, Then They Called, Then They Got an Invoice. After the .com crash, I got hired by a small software company. They didn't have a really good product, and it was obvious they were already on the way down. One day, the owner called in with instructions to fire all the salespeople. They weren't making any sales anyway. I did it. At the end of the month, he calls to ask how sales were going. About as good as can be expected with no salespeople, I told him. A week later, the hammer came down on the rest of us. We were all let go and handed our severance checks. I immediately went to the bank branch the check was drawn on to cash it. It bounced. Since I still had keys to the office, I went back in and grabbed a handful of high-end laptops and took them home. Another week went by. He called to ask about the missing laptops. They're not missing. I'm holding them till you make good on the bounced check. I was told that was theft and they would be pressing charges. I said, great, I'll be contacting the Labor Relations Board about your shady practices and the police about knowingly passing a bad check for thousands of dollars. There was a pause. I was asked to stop back by the office to exchange the laptops for another check. It felt like a scene out of a movie. The owner asked, do you have the laptops? Me, they're close by. Do you have my check? He handed me the check. I went and cashed it, came back and handed him the laptops. Check cleared, story over. Now I'm kind of thinking about that episode of South Park when Cartman was dealing KFC.
It's all there, man.
Extra crispy, right?
Of course, man. I ain't no fool.
So what'd you think of the stories from Cora? Should we keep it up? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to hit the like button because that's how YouTube's gonna know to show more people my content. That way it's not just you watching me all day long, even though I appreciate it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. The more people that see this, the more videos I can make, and I would love to make this my job. Our time together does not have to end. On the screen now, YouTube is giving you some other options for some other Storytime with Sean videos. So keep watching and I'll keep hanging out with you. I've been told I have a great voice to listen to. I can be there while you're working, studying, just relaxing, whatever you're doing. I can totally be a part of your day. See you later.